Hello everyone. In this video we will develop the custom workflow, and I will show you how to develop the custom workflow from scratch, and I'll also show you how the some important points while developing the custom workflow. So before I proceed to the coding part of the custom workflow, let me tell you the scenario which I'm going to achieve here. So I have the entity called student, and when I create the new record of this entity, I have the field called date of birth. So when I'll set the date of birth, I want to set up the upcoming date of birth. So I will be adding few validations based on the date of birth. So like you cannot set the date of birth as a future date of birth, and also if the date of birth is say less than the current month, then the next date of birth, upcoming date of birth, will be the next year. So those validations we will be writing inside the custom workflow logic. These validations you can still achieve using through the JavaScript, and there are other way also you can do, but I wanted to show you through the custom workflow how to do that. That is why I have taken this simple scenario, and we will be doing the custom workflow for this requirement. So let's flip to the Visual Studio here. This is the solution which we had developed in the previous video for the plugin, and this solution is built successfully. So we have the plugin folder, all the plugins resides here. So likewise I have added the folder for the custom workflow. Inside this custom workflow folder, I will be putting my all custom workflow classes. So let me add the new class here for our requirement, and the class name I want as, since I will register for the student here, and that it is next date of birth. Add it. So after that, before you go to the coding part, you have to make sure you have added the microsoft.xlm.sdk.workflow namespace. If not, you can go to the NuGet package manager, and from here you can install that. So SDK, we have SDK workflow, and when you search that, then you can download this download this assembly to your project. Once it is added to your project, then you can find that into your reference folder here. So once it is present inside the reference folder, then you have to bring up some namespace. So using microsoft.xlm.sdk and using microsoft.xlm.sdk.workflow, and then another important namespace we need, that is the system.activities. So using system.activities, and meaning is that system.activities has the class called activities, and that inherits has the one child class that is called CodeActivity. I'll show you that. So let me inherit that for the CodeActivity here. So you can see this CodeActivity is present inside this namespace. Let me comment this, then you will see that error is coming here, meaning that this CodeActivity is present inside the system.activities, and we have to inherit our custom workflow logic from this CodeActivity. And when you go to this class definition, you will see that this class is inheriting from the activity class, and this class is nothing but the abstract class. And for this abstract class, we have the method called the execute method. So when you implement this, when you inherit this CodeActivity, then when you implement this class, because all the abstract class we have to implement, but when you implement that, you should have the execute method implemented there. You have to have, so any class to be become a abstract class, one function definitely has to be one function or parameters or attributes, we can say, definitely has to be abstract. So means when you have when this execute method is defined as abstract, this execute method we have to implement in our child class, means custom workflow. There we have to implement other method which is declared inside this abstract class. Those are called the concrete method. If you want, then you can use that. If you see the parameters for this execute method, it is CodeActivity context, and all the parameters are like input parameters or other properties which will set to the custom workflow, it will be coming through this context. So this is how the CodeActivity is implemented here. So you can, when you implement this, let me implement this, you will see the execute method is here added, and we have to override that. So all the abstract method, when you implement, then we have to override that. So it is override. So what is the use of this SDK.workflow? So you have the some, if you want to set some input parameters, and then if you want to get the execution context of this workflow, then those are present inside that. So we have to use this. Let me show you that. So like if you want to set some input parameter, so like here, So in if you input attribute, you have to give and say some input. Okay, and here if you want, you make this a input argument as required, you can make it as required argument. And then if then we have the public, and then in argument, and then you can give, if it is input is a string type, then we can give then my input a string, and then gets it. So if when you see this, when you have added this input, you will see this. This is all automatically highlighted. Means this namespace to set the any input and output argument to the custom workflow. Then this namespace is useful, and you can see here this is highlighted because this is not finding here. Along with that, we have the I workflow context. So it is not coming because we have not added here. So let me uncomment this, and you will see this I workflow context. So this is the class, and we have to this is present inside this ticket overflow. So inside this, all the parameters which we have set, all the context which is coming to the custom workflow is present, and we can frame here using the I workflow context. So that is the use of this ticket overflow. But if you want to get some services, if you want to perform some tasks like create, update, or some different activities you want to do using the services, then this namespace we have to use xm.sdk. Inside that, we have the I organization plugin, I organization service factory, and using the service factory we will create the I organization service, and those are present inside this SDK. So that is why minimum, I think these 3 namespace we have to add here while developing the custom workflow. Okay, so that was a quick part related to the custom workflow, which we should know that. Okay, so we have added this as per our requirement here. I will set this record which is created or updated. The GUID of this record, I mean, I want this record there as a lookup, and inside this lookup I will have the ID and the schema name of this record. So we have to do that. So we have different way of we have the way of taking the input as like this. So to take the input as a lookup, so we have the input, and here say the date of birth for record, and here I want this input as a required, so it is required argument. And to take any input as a lookup, then we have the attribute called the reference target. And if you'll see, when you set up the reference target, it is asking the entity name of which type of entity you want the lookup. So I want dnlb underscore the student. And finally, you have to put the argument which name you want to access. So in argument, and then it is entity reference, and the name I want as a student, and then get set. So this is how you will set the lookup field. But if you have some different types of input, say like it is integer, then here you can change this one. You can set this as input as int. If it is decimal, you can do. If it is currency term, then you can as money. Likewise, if it is 2 option set, then you can make it as boolean. So this is how you will set the input argument. To set the output argument, we will use the attribute name as output here, and you can give the name by which name you want to output here. So some output you can say, and here you can make as public. We have the out argument here, and you can give the name, or if you want some string type, whatever the data types you want, you can give here, and then the name which we will use inside our code. So out. So and then finally gets it. So this is how you will set the input and output argument. So let me get rid of this first, because in my scenario here I don't need the output argument, because the update of this field I will be doing inside my code. Okay, so I just need only one input here, that is date of birth, and no, sorry, that is the lookup for the student here, and I will be querying through the GUID which I'll get in from this to the student entity, and I'll find the date of birth from that record. So let's proceed to do that. So first of all, I have to take the I workflow context. So name it as a workflow context. Workflow context. That is equals to the context dot get extension, and here we will pass the I workflow context. Okay, so we got the context now. So if you want to create this service, then how we do for the plugin using the I organization service factory, we'll use that same way. So I organization service factory, name it as service factory, that is equals to the context dot get extension, and here we have the, in the plugin we have the get service, right? But in case of workflow we have the get extension, and we have to pass the which type of extension you want. So this is I organization service factory, and using the service factory we will create the I organization service. So name it as service, and that is from the service factory dot create organization service, and that is under the context of user. So it is workflow context dot initiating user. So when you're taking as initiating user, then the user who is logged in, was trying to perform this, who is trying to perform the action, who is trying to perform some task to call this workflow, that is initiating user. But when you give as a user ID, then who is the owner of that workflow? When you configure the workflow, then who is the owner of that workflow? It will run under the context, security context of that user. So that is the difference between the initiating user and user ID. So we got this. Now the first task is we have to get the GUID. We have to get the GUID of this record. So how we'll get that? So we'll get GUID as a name it as a student ID, that equals to the, we have this dot student, and then inside that we have a method called get, and here we have to pass this context. You can see we have three different type of overload method here, and it is all expecting the context. So we have to pass this context, which is coming as a code activity context. So we'll pass here, so context, and inside this context we'll have the input argument, this one which we have set, that is nothing but the reference type. So from this we'll get the ID here, ID. So now we got this student ID, which we will set into the workflow, custom workflow, and using this student ID, I will query through the student record. So entity, name it as a student entity, that is equals to the service dot retrieve, and then I know the schema name of that, so dnlb underscore the student, and then ID is student ID, and then the column set which I want to retrieve, and I want only one field, that is dnlb underscore date of birth. Only one field I need. Okay, then inside this on this entity I will have the record, and that inside that I will have one attribute called date of birth. So let me add the next date of birth. So like let me add some validation. So like uh, for that, like what date of birth what we retrieve from this service, right, service call. So let's check that first. So date time, we have date time, and then then we can say the date of variable name as date of birth. Okay, and here I want to check with null condition. So how you can do that? So if you see when you're making as date time with the date time equal date of birth equals to the new date time, so new date time. So in this case, the default value will be here 1 1 0 0 0 1. So this is the default value when you set any object with date time. It is not null. So when you define this date time with the new date time, so this value is not null. You cannot set this as a null. If you see here like date of birth equals to null, you will see that null is not able to convert to date of time, date of birth, so date time here. So it will throw this exception like cannot convert null to date time, because this date of birth is not nullable type. So to make this as a nullable type, you have to make this question mark here at the data types which you want to set for the variable. When you set that, then you will see this nullable. You can say that means for that particular variable you can set that null. So I want the validation with the null. So let me set that here. So that is equals to here, and I'll take the date of birth as nullable type here. Okay, this is not nullable type is not applicable only for the date time. You can make for the integer also. Like if you want for the integer, then you can make as a nullable integer like that. You can set, if you want, you can set it equals to null here. So it will not throw exception or any error, because this variable is not nullable. But when you remove the question mark, then this variable is not a nullable type, and then it will throw the error for you. Okay, so fine. So that was the quick introduction, quick information about this nullable type. Okay, and then we got the variable for the date of birth. Let me set the date of birth to this. So first of all, let's check the retrieve, the what we have retrieved from the service, that is student entity, and dot contains the dnlb underscore the date of birth. sometimes if you have misspelled the schema name here, then in the result set, in the result entity, result collection, or whatever you have inside that, those fields will not be present. So that is why you make sure you are checking with that the field is containing or not. So I'm checking that one. So in the result set, if it is having date of birth field present, then I will save that. So it is date of birth equals to the student entity, and from that I have the date of birth, and we have to cast it because this is nullable type of, right? So we have to cast it here. So date term, and that is nullable, so it is fine. So now let's check the what value of date of birth. Now validations will do. So if the date of birth dot value dot years, if it is greater than the current year, then this is invalid year date of birth, right? So date time dot now dot year, if it is greater than, then we'll throw the exception, throw in new exception, and that is date of birth cannot have year greater than current year. Okay, and since we throw the exception but we are not catching anywhere, so we have to put this code into the try catch block. Okay, so let me add that and exception ex, and let me throw the here new invalid plugin execution exception and message as ex dot message. Okay, and all this piece of code we have to put into the try block. Okay, so we'll put here, fine. So we throw the exception. Now another condition is like if else if here, else if the date of birth dot value dot year, if it is equals to the current year, so means the date time dot, sorry, date time, it should be date time dot now dot year, if it is in the same year, then what, then it is based on the month then, right? If the month is greater than the current month, then again we'll throw the exception. So if the date of birth dot value dot month, if it is greater than the date time dot now dot month, then we'll throw the exception, throw a new exception, and that is the date of birth cannot have a month greater than current month and year. Okay, now if it is less than, then if it is else if the date of birth is the same date of birth dot value dot month, if it is equals to the current month, say date time dot now dot month, if it is the same month, then we'll check based on the date, which date means if you're in the same, like if it is in the March month and the current date of birth is 1 March, then you are setting the future date like 30th of March, then this is invalid. So that validations I'm doing here. If the date of birth dot value dot day, if it is greater than the date time dot now dot day, then we'll throw the exception. So throw new exception here, and that is date of birth cannot be greater than current date. Okay, so finally we did our all validation. So if it is passed, then means our date of birth is correct, which we got. So this is done. So next, once I have this date of birth, if it is present here, right? If not, then what we'll do? So you can see here this if condition we have given here. If the data, if this result set having the date of birth set there, then I will do. If not, then I will set this as null. So date of birth equals to the null. Okay, and let's check if the date of birth equals to the null, then we'll return from this workflow. So return. If not, then we will calculate the next date of birth. So let me do that. So it will be date time, that is called the next date of birth, and that is equals to the I will write this one method called the get next date of birth, and I will pass the date of birth dot value here. Okay, so this method I have to generate. So when you click this, and here you will see when you generate this, and see below one method is generated, it is having return type as date time, which we have given here, and the parameter is date of birth, which is nothing but type of date time. And this method we will be setting the conditions, like how the next date of birth has to be calculated. So to do this, let me take the variable here, date time, name it as next dob, that is equals to the new date time, and that will set using the value here. So let me name this as a date of birth, this variable, I mean that's my input parameter here, and date of birth dot year. So if you see the new method of this data, we have 12 different types of overload method. You can see 12 different types. So I will be using this method year, month, and day to create the new variable date of birth. So here it is dot year, then date of birth dot month, date of birth month, then date of birth dot day. We will get this. Now based on this next date of birth, we have to do the validation. So first of all, let's check if the date of birth is the leap year or not. So if the next date of birth dot month, if it is equals to the 2 Feb month, and then next date of birth dot the day, if it is equals to 29th, so means the date of birth for this student is nothing but the leap year, inside the leap year. So let me return that next DOB here. Fine. So here, if it is leap year, then we will writing logic here. So that is to do. Okay. If not, then here else, then we'll write that. So let's take the else condition first. So else, if means the date of birth is not the leap year, then we'll check the when we are going to create this student. So since already we have done the validations for the year, right? If it is year is greater than the current year, then we'll throw the exception. So definitely the date will be the valid one. So but when we are going to create the record, so that we have to check. So if the next date of birth dot the month, if it is greater than, sorry, less than the date time dot date time dot now dot the year, sorry, month, if the date of birth, so means the record of the student which we are going to create, if it is if it is greater than the data month of the actual data month of the student, that time means we have missed the say we have missed to update the date of birth for the current year, right? Then we have to increase the year by 1. So that's why I'm checking this one. So the next date of birth will be equals to the new date of birth, new date time, and that is we have to take next date of sorry, we have to take the current year, right? So it is date time dot now dot year, and then we'll add +1 because it has missed the current year, right? So we'll increment the year by 1, and the same month and same date. So it is next date of birth dot month, and the next date of birth dot day. Okay. If not, then means when the date of birth is less than the means we didn't okay, here when it is less than, so else here the if the month is less than the current date, then here we'll check else if here if the next date of birth dot month, if it is equals to the current month, so date time, so here date time dot now dot month, then here we'll write that cause else here will go. Okay, so here if it is same month, then we'll check the based on the day, right, which day it is. So if the next date of birth dot day, if it is greater than, sorry, less than the current date, right? So date time dot now dot day. In this case, will increase the year. So we'll set up this. Otherwise, let me remove this and I'll just simply let me set up this. We'll see that how it will, later on we'll change this condition. So let me copy this and let me remove this else condition, this part. Let me take only the else part here. Okay, let me save this here. So here simple things we are doing. So when the current month is less than the current month, means the date of birth month is less than the current month, then I will increase the year by 1 and keep the same date and month. And else then it will have the same year. So it will be the current year only if the month is same. Okay. Since here we didn't check with this date, I think we have to do with that. We'll do that later when we register that. We'll see if any violation happens. Okay, now if the date of birth, which is the current month, then what we'll do? So first of all, let's check the current year, which is leap year or not. So date of birth, so date time dot is leap year, and that is date time dot now dot year. If the current year is leap year or not, so we will check based on that. So if current year is not leap year, and else the leap year here. If the current year is not leap year, then based on the date of the month. So like if the next date of birth then dot the month, if it is less than the date time dot now dot month, then here we'll check, we'll set the next year. So before you set the next year, we have to make that sure that next year is the leap year or not, because here we are inside the not leap year condition here. This is not leap year, right? If it is not leap year, then if the month is less than the current month, then we will set the next year. But next year we have to check whether it is leap year or not. So if it is leap year, so date time dot is leap year, and that is date time dot now dot year plus 1. So that is next year. If it is leap year, then what we will do? When it is leap year, then we'll keep the date of birth as same. Like we can means, and for the leap year we can have the 29th as date there, right? But year will be incremented, right? Else the if the next year is not leap year, then in this case the date of birth will be the 1 day prior. Means if the date of birth is 29, then we will send the email on the 28th. So we'll subtract 1 and then we'll increase this year. Okay, in the case if this date of if the date of birth is the if the month which in the month we are going to get the record, if it is less than the month of the data month of this trend, then in this case we will not increase the year. So we'll copy this and we'll set here and then we will not increase the year. And since we are in the leap year, so we have to decrease the date by 1. So it should be 28th of the current year. So this is done. This is the case for the not leap year. But when it is the case of leap year, so we'll check against the data means the month of the date of birth. So it is next date of birth dot month. If it is less than the date time dot now dot month, here month, then here we will set the next year. So let me copy this. So it will be the leap year as +1 since we are in the leap year. So the next year definitely it will be the not leap year, because when you are the leap year and when you get the next year, that is definitely not a leap year. So that is why I will not check this leap year condition with the next year leap year, because when you are in the not leap year, the upcoming year could be the leap year. That is why we have to check this condition. But when you are definitely in the leap year, so this is condition for the leap year, right? So when you are in the leap year, the next year definitely it is not a leap year, and from that we have to subtract the day -1. Okay, else then the date of birth will be the same date of birth for the current year, right? So date of birth will not increase the year; it will be the current year and with the current date. So this is fine. Let me add this case for this here for the by the date or day also. So if here here, let me add here, else if the next date of birth dot month equals to the date time dot now dot month, then here we will write the if the next data month next date of birth dot day, if it is like less than the date time dot now dot day here, then we will set this next year. So copy this and we'll set as next year, so next year plus 1 and the same day and month, else then it will be the same year, right? So it will be the same year with the same date. Okay, if it is the other date, means if it is greater than something like that, then it is fine. So we will say the same date and year. So this is the code I have written for the uh, for the uh, next get next date of birth. So this is returning the data date time for me, right? So I will be using that here inside my code here. So inside this variable I'll get that. So let me update the student record here. So before that, we'll create the entity called the update student, that is close to the new entity, and that is type of the dnlb underscore student, and the update student entity dot id, that is equals to the student id which we have got, and then the schema name of the field which we are going to update. So dnlb underscore the schema name of this field, that is next date of birth, is uh, dnlb underscore next date of birth. Okay, that is equals to the next date of birth which we got here, and then finally service dot update the update student. So this is done. So this is the code for that calculating the date of birth validation. So I think everything is fine. Let me reveal this. Okay, success. Now we'll go to the we have to register this code to the CRM. So for that we can use the same plugin registration tool. So I have already opened the plugin registration tool, and this is my solution. I mean, this is my assembly we have added to the workflow. So let me update this. So we'll select this and update. Go to the we'll select this library which we have built, and here we'll select that and register this. Stand not found in the assembly means it is not found here, the plugin workflow activity type. So let me see this. So here let me rebuild this. Okay, it means some I had some assembly which I have removed, that one, so it is not found. So which I have removed is this one. So let me remove these two. So and register this. That is why in my solution it is not there. That is why it is throwing the exception. So that is error. So let me remove this. So I will not have any workflow here. Okay, I'm having only one workflow. Let me rebuild this again, and let me add this. Let me update this library here. Okay, so we have updated this successfully. Now let me check the library. Since this class we didn't make the public class, that is why it is not available here. So we have to make this as public class, and then this will be available here. So let me update this one more time. Let me rebuild this and update one more time. So this class, our custom workflow class, is now public, so it will be available there. So let me update this again. Here, select that, and you will see that this is present here, custom workflow which we have created here, right? So let me select this all and update this. Okay, so one register, one updated, fine. So means our workflow is now into the dynamic. So we have to use that. So how we'll use? So we'll go to the solution. So this is the solutions I have. This is my custom solution. Inside that, I don't have any process configure. You can see I don't have any process. So I will be adding the new process kind of type of workflow. So let me give the name as next date of birth. Okay, and the type I want as a workflow, and the entity I want to register is for the student here. So this entity. So let me, and you can see here, run this workflow in the background. If you want this workflow as a synchronous or asynchronous, you have to check this. So when it is in background, then it is asynchronous. So I don't want the workflow as asynchronous. I want as a synchronous workflow. So that is why I will uncheck that. And we have to set these input and input parameters and the steps, how you want to call that. So let it get loaded here. Close this. Let me open this one more time. Okay, so workflow is loaded here, and you can see we have few points. We can see we have the few things on the workflow. We should know that. First of all, the scope, which I have already discussed in the last video. I have explained what are the use of each scope. When you make this scope as organization label, then any user of that organization, they can trigger this workflow. So I want my workflow to be as organization label, and you can see the entity and the category you cannot change once you have created this workflow. And also, if you want this workflow to be as asynchronous, then you can convert this here by this ribbon button here. You can convert that to background. And also, if you want this workflow to be run on the demand, you can make this as on demand process. And if you see the execute here, we have the two different execute. That is what I was saying. When you want to run the workflow as the under the security context of the owner, then you have to select this one. If you want to if you want to run this workflow under the context of the login user, then you will select this option. Okay, that is why I have selected this one. That is meaning that I have taken the initiating user ID in my code here. You can see here, this is the initiating user ID here. I have taken that. Okay, once we have this, if you want other trigger point for that, so I want one trigger point on create of record, and also when the field is changed, and which field, that is date of birth. When we change this date of birth field, then I want to trigger that. So I have selected this. Fine. After that, we'll have the steps we have to configure. So first of all, I want to insert one stays here, and that is the custom workflow which I have developed now. So it will be present here. If you see this solution which we have built, that is this one. Inside that, you will see all the custom workflow we have developed. So this is the custom workflow, and if you see the name, it is nothing but the student underscore next date of birth. So that we have to add here, that custom workflow. When you add here, you will see it is asking the property. When you go to the set property, and you will see the input name which we have given as a lookup, right? It will be coming here. You can see this date of birth for the record which we have given here inside the input argument, and we have to set the record of the student which is created, right? So here we'll go, and we have to set this field here, that is nothing but lookup. So that I want dynamics. You can see for the student, I have the student, and the field I want as a student. So we'll select that, and we'll make it as a dynamic. So this is done. So this is kind of required field which we have given here as a required argument. Because of that, it is coming. So now we got it. So let me save and close this. And the next step I want here is to be completed. So let me add as process stop workflow, and then we'll stop the workflow will succeed. Okay, fine. So it means we have configured the workflow. It is ready to be used. So before that, we have to make this as active. So save and make it as active. When you activate the workflow, then your workflow is ready to be used. So let me make it as active. Okay, so workflow is configured, it is active. Now let me go to the our student entity. Let me create the new student. Okay, and I will set the value. So test date of birth. Okay, and the date of birth, I want to set the same year. No, let me take the different year. So let's say it is 90 January the 7th. Okay, now in this case, since the month is less than the current month, right? So the our date of birth should be the year 2021 with the same date which we have here, right? Okay, then I will pass the parameter mandatory field here, and then select. Fine, let me save this. When you will save, you can see the date, next date of birth is same date and the year is 2021. But when you change this day year as next year, say if it is August, or say 25th August, and when you save this, then you should get the error, because date of birth cannot have month greater than the current month and year, which we have set here for the validations, right? So this is how you can build the custom workflow. Okay, so that was the quick introduction for the custom workflow, and I hope you learn from this video. And if you have any doubt, you can let me know, and you can let me know your suggestions for this video. And thank you for watching this video, guys.